The Gemara on Daf Yud Ches Beis is discussing the Mishnah Machlokes Beis Shammai Beis Hillel, what you're allowed to leave on the fire, what you're allowed to leave work from before Shabbos to be done on Shabbos, and the Gemara is going through different things. So ask the Gemara, when you have a tzemer liyoiro, you put your wool into a dye, into a vat to get it to dye the wool. Ask the Gemara how you're allowed to leave it on Shabbos. Why we not goizer shemi yichata? So the Gemara answers, it's talking about a yoira akura. The yoira is no longer on the fire. The vat is off the fire. So there's no gzeir shemi yichata. Ask the Gemara, it's very good that it's off the fire, but what happened to the chshash, a new chshash that the Gemara asks? And we have to be mevar, the only time that the Gemara has a chshash of hagasa, the Gemara only asks it by tzemer liyoira, that's off a fire. The Gemara does not ask it in any other place. Which is really a question. Every time you have food on the fire on Erev Shabbos, we have a blech. The halacha is that even you have food that's not fully cooked, if at least it got to Meichel ben Desoy, or if it's not Meichel ben Desoy, you have it. You make you have a blech. It's grufa and ketuma. The food's covered. The halacha is you're allowed to leave the food on the fire for Shabbos. Now, we're not worried about hagasa. So we have to discuss why over here the Gemara only asked a problem that tzemer liyoira, this wool in the vat that's off the fire. The Gemara has a problem with hagasa. So the Gemara asks v'neichosh, why are we not choshid for hagasa? So in that the Gemara says that's covered. You don't have to be worried. You don't have to be worried about hagasa. It's the vat. Not only is it off the fire, it's fully covered. It's like cement is closed. You're not going to have to be worried that the person's going to do hagasa. Now, what is the chshash of hagasa in this Gemara that we're discussing about? The Gemara is worried about tzemer liyoira, that there will be an isser on Shabbos, that the Gemara is worried, even something off the fire, that there should be an isser of hagasa. So in this we have a tremendous machlokes between Rashi and Tosfos, which will play out a machlokes between many different Rishonim, and have a lot of halachic nafkaminas for us. Rashi learns that the Gemara's question was that v'neichash duma migis u'b'mevushal have bishul, and something that's cooking hagasa to stir the pot, and something that's cooked, there's a chashash that it's bishul, and that the Gemara was choshid, even when it's off the fire, you should have to be worried. How come you're allowed to do it? Tosfos says no, duma migis ba v'havit seveh. We're not worried about the chashash of bishul. We're worried about a totally different chashash, the chashash of tzviyah, that you're doing it. So we have a fundamental machlokes between Rashi and Tosfos already on the page, how to interpret what the Gemara's kasha was when you have this food off the pot, this tzemer, this dye in the wool, off the pot, that there's a chashash that a person might come to do hagasa to stir it. Rashi says that the issue that we're dealing with is the isser of bishul, and Tosfos says it's the isser of tzeveh. Now, the Marsha explains that the machlokes between Rashi and Tosfos is Tosfos felt that once something's already off the fire, you don't have to worry about bishul, which is not so easy to understand. Why? So then Tosfos learned it's severe that you're dyeing it by stirring it. You're helping the dye come into the wool stronger, and that's a melacha of tzeveh. The Marsha is a little difficult to understand because we know that the halacha is even a kli rishon can be mavashel. You take a pot off the fire. You can't put things into it because it could cook. You could have hot water, boil up a pot, afterwards put in an egg, and it could cook, fully cook the egg. It can even cook things that are not kali abishal after it's off the fire. So the Marshal's interpretation of Tosfos, why Tosfos learned that seveh is a little difficult to say something's off the fire is no cooking, unless he felt that the mila of stirring something that helps the cooking, stirring only helps when something's actually on a fire. Something that's off a fire, you're not going to say that by stirring it a little bit, it's going to help the bishul. Something that's on a fire, you stir it, it brings the bishul closer. But to stir something that's off a fire, that would never be worried that that's the makar of the bishul. That's what I think what the Marsha means to say in Tosfos, why Tosfos learned this seveh. The Marsha, the Goyen interprets that Tosfos' shita is a little differently. Tosfos' shita is that once something's already cooked, k'maichel brender soy, we have a halacha, a tremendous machlokes Rishonim, which we're going to talk about a little later, that once something's already cooked, k'maichel brender soy, is no longer a chiyav bishul. Once something's cooked either a third or a half, once it's cooked, you can't be mavashel a second time. So it interprets the Tosfos. So you have to learn the Gemara as a different halacha because you already had on the fire before Shabbos. You had some cooking being done. But Rashi holds that no, that the Chi of Bishul is until it's Nizbashal Kol Tzorchei, when it's fully cooked, and even being cooked a third is not enough to say that there's no Bishul afterwards. So it interprets the Goy, and that's what Rashi was able to learn the Gemara based on the halacha of Bishul. And Tosfos had to learn the problem with the sugi will be halacha of Tzviyah. Now, the Rashba and the Ramban ask Rashi a very strong question. We know that a person, like we discussed before, we know if you have a food that's fully cooked, not fully cooked, something that's cooked, you start, you have a fresh piece of meat, you want to put it onto the fire, Erev Shabbos, you come home 5 minutes before Shkia, you didn't get a chance to put up your cholent, you put it up right before Shabbos, you put it on either you put it on with a blech, and it's what we call garif akatim. You cover the fire, you cover the knobs, you leave the food on the fire. So ask the Rashba, why over there is the Gemara not, the only issue that Chazal were worried about was that a person might come to stir the coals. There's a gzeira that he might be mechate b'gecholim. We're not worried about the issue that he might come to do hagasa, that he might stir the food. The only issue that Chazal were worried about in such a case was that he might come to stir the coals. Why are we not worried over there about the issue of stirring the food and only worried about stirring the coals? And says the Ramban, it's much more logical to be worried that a person might come stir the food. Why are we only worried about the coals? This is the Rashba and the Ramban's question on Rashi. So again, if you interpret that the Gemara like Tosfos, the Ramban says, then it's beautiful. If you interpret that the Gemara never was worried about food that a person might come to stir it. The only problem is that that it's actually a dye that's, in wool, and there, if you don't stir it, it hardens, and it can ruin the whole job that you're trying to do. So over there, we're choshev for hagasa. But on food, we don't have to be worried about hagasa. This is the Ramban's question on Rashi. That why would we not be worried about every food on Erev Shabbos? Why would we not be worried about hagasa on the food? Now the Ramban says the Gemara's question is only based on the issue of tzviyah and not of hagasa. But the Ramban says, so what's the answer to the question? Why are we not worried about food, about an issue of hagasa? So he gives two different terutzim. One teretz is that the only time a person's chayiv hagasa is for hagasa rishoina. The first hagasa that a person does to food, that's what helps for the cooking process. But there's no hagasa achar hagasa. The same way we have idea ein bishul achar bishul, there's the idea of ein hagasa achar hagasa. After you do something one time, then already you took care of the problem. You helped the food by stirring it one time. Then it's already stirred, and there's no need to stir something a second time. This is the Ramban and Rajva's first teretz, and the second teretz that he gives, that once food already reaches Kemaychel Ben Dursoy, the same way that the Rajva holds, the Ramban, that there's no bishul afterwards. So if there's no bishul, there's obviously no chiyuv for hagasa. Now, important to note that there's a tremendous nafkamina between these two terutzim. If the teretz is that you only chayiv for the first hagasa, and that's why you let it put food on the fire in Erev Shabbos, and you're not worried about the gzeira that a person might come to stir the food, so then you could always put food on the fire in Erev Shabbos, so you can put the cholent fresh. But Rekiv Eger points out, if you're worried about the Rajva's second teretz, that the reason why we're not worried about hagasa on food is based on the fact that once it already reached the situation of already reached being cooked, Kemaychel Ben Dursoy, cooked a third, that's why we're not worried about hagasa, because there's no, the same way there's no bishul, there's no issue of cooking, there's no issue of stirring it. So then, says Rekiv Eger, to put fresh food on the fire, he doesn't know why it should be mutter on Erev Shabbos. He doesn't understand the heter of Kedei Rechaisa. Doesn't fully understand why you'd be able to put the food directly on the fire right before Shabbos, even with a blech. It's garif, a cotton, everything's covered. You cover the knobs, you covered the fire. Why are we not concerned that a person might come and do hagasa and stir the food, and then he'll be chayiv? So if it's already Meichel Ben Dusoy, so you have the teretz of the Raja, there's no Chiv Agosa. But to Meichel Ben Dusoy, the Kivega said Tzorchin Ladino, if a person would be permitted. Now, the Mishnah Berurah does bring down the Chumrah of Kivega and the Bir Halacha. In Mishnah Berurah, it sounds like he's not so worried about it. But in the Bir Halacha, he quotes this Chumrah Kivega. He doesn't understand. Even after Garf Akatam should only be permitted once it reaches Meichel Ben Dusoy, which is cooked a third. That then you don't have to worry about cooking. That would be the idea that Mishnah Berurah quotes from Kivega. Now it comes out, which we'll see soon be Geshmak, that if you hold like the other Rishonim, that even after something's cooked a third, you're still chayiv for bishul, which is a tremendous machlokes Rishonim. That there's a halach of ein bishul acher bishul. Once something's cooked, you're not chayiv for cooking it a second time. What is that shir that's called cooked? We know that once something's cooked a third, it has certain halachas for bishul akum and different halachas that's considered it's cooked. And you're chayiv on Shabbos if you cook something from 0 to a third or 0 to half. But if you cook it from half to kol tzarkoi, what's the halach? So it's the machlokes Rishonim between the Rambam and other Rishonim. If in such a case the person will be chayiv. Now, if you follow the logic of the Rambam, that in case where something started off, it's half cooked or a third cooked, then you finish it up, you're chayiv. So then you don't have the Rajva's teretz. Why are you allowed to leave food on a fire in Erev Shabbos? Why are you not worried about Hagasa once it got to a third? Because even after a third, you can be chayiv, unless it's fully cooked. So the only answer, you'd have to find a different interpretation to understand Al Gemara's kasha. That maybe that's why Rashi learned that the Gemara's kasha was based on the idea. You learn the Gemara's kasha based on the idea of tzviyah, and you'll say only by tzviyah we're choshit for the iser of Hagasa. But leaving food on a fire, we're not worried that a person would come along and stir the food on the fire. Because that chash, that little enhancing of the cooking that's given by stirring the food on the fire, we're not choshit for. Because if you would be choshid, you'd never be able to leave food on the fire on Shabbos. Because then you'd always be choshid that a person would come stir unless it's fully cooked. So then, for that reason, the Rambam had to maybe interpret the Gemara's kasha was based on the Isser of Tzeveah, of dying like Tosis, not on the Isser of Hagasa. That would be the cheshbon of how to learn the Gemara, and the nafkamina would come out if you put food on Erev Shabbos. What would be? Why are we worried or not worried for Hagasa? Now, I'd like to. The Rajba's other question. The Rajba asked a very strong question that if we're worried for Hagasa, the Rajba asks, how could you take the food off the fire? Ask the Rajba a question: how could a person ever take food out with a ladle? Why are we not worried about Hitzah B'Kaf? The Rajba calls it. Why are we not worried taking food off a pot with a ladle? Inherently, some food's gonna come mixed. And why are we not worried about the Isser Hagasa? That's the Rajba's question. You have the food off the fire. We have a Gemara that says we're choshid for Hagasa. So why are we not choshid that even the food is ready off the fire? Because the Gemara by Tzemer is going, even the wool is not on the fire, and we're still choshid for Hagasa. So ask the Rajba, why are we not choshid to take food out of a pot? You take off the shal on Friday, Shabbos day. Why are we not worried for the Isser Hagasa? So the Rajba on that gives two teruts. His first teretz is that the only time we're choshid for that really you only chai for that Hagasa Rishonim, like we quoted before from the Ramban. But only by tzemer, by a dye, there the second time and the third time, and it helps more because you're worried that it's gonna harden. There you chai for Hagasa. Masha ein kain on food you only chai for Hagasa Rishonim. And then a second answer would be that once it gets to Meichel Ben Dusoy, you don't have to worry about Hagasa. Now, we can discuss this in Mirz Hashem later, but the Sharatzian understood the Rajva's teretz that the chiluk between a food and a dye is that by a dye you're chayiv because it's a ve'ah. That by mixing it, since you're worried that it's going to harden, that second and third mixing is an issue of tzeveah. That's a tremendous chiddush. You could have understood the Rajva, but it's very simple. That Hagasa, the lomdus why there's no second Hagasa and third Hagasa is because once you mix the food, it's already mixed. You know, you have the cholent, you put up the cholent, and you don't mix the ketchup and the different ingredients you put in, so the food's missing. You're gonna have some spices in one place and no spice in the other place. So once you did your first Hagasa, then you're no longer chayiv for a second Hagasa. But on a dye, or in a place that it would help to continuously mix the food, maybe it's not, you're not the pshat Yechayev because of dying, you're Chayev because of, that will be based on the halacha of Hagasa of Bishul. You don't have to learn that the Rajba's teretz, the difference between a food and a dye is one's Bishul, one's Seveh. They're both Bishul. But it's not clear from the Rajba that he means to say that you're Chayev because of it's Seveh. Maybe you're Chayev because of Bishul. But after something's cooked, after you did your first and second Hagasa, by food there's nothing left to do. Mashenki by dye, there's stuff left to do, and you be Chayev for Seveh, for Bishul. But it is clear in the Ramban, who was quoting before, that he learned that by a dye, because it's Seveh, he says the same lumnus of Ein Bishul, of Ein Hagasa Hagasa, so maybe that's where the Sharatzim was coming from, to interpret the Rajba's teretz based on the idea to interpret the Rajba's teretz that he means to say Tzviya, not Bishul. Now, on this machlokes Rishonim, this question that the Rajba poses, how can you take food off a fire even when it's already off the fire? How can you take food out of a pot? What happened to the Isser Vagosa? There's a Rambam on this. And there's a few Rambams, and with that, hopefully we could get back to say a pshat in a very shver rosh, how he interprets Rashi and Al Gemara's Kasha, Mishum Neichash doing Megis. The Rambam says in Perek Gimel Halacha Yud Aleph, the Milchas Shabbos, that also lahachnes magreifel kedei b'Shabbos v'hi ala ish. You're not allowed to stick in a shovel, something to take food out of a fire, on a pot when it's on the ish. One tonight the Rambam says, l'hoitzimena b'Shabbos, to take out food on Shabbos, v'pnei ish megis, because it's considered doing hagasa by taking out the food. That's gonna cause the other food to stir. Either it's indirectly that, somehow by taking out some food, the other food, moves around, or that's exactly, it's the idea of that in itself is sticking the ladle in is considered a hagos. Now the Rambam says a very important tanai v'hi ala ish, that's on the fire. So obviously he can't be coming from Al Gemara Daf Yud Ches Amud Beis, because Al Gemara says that by dye there's the issue of hagos even off the fire. So the Rambam clearly learned the Gemara not like the other Rishonim because of Bishul. The Rambam learned that Al Gemara is based on the fact of Sevea, of dye. I think it's clear because the Rambam says that the Tnai for Hagos has to be only on the fire. Now the Rambam says, and it comes out that he's cooking on Shabbos. So, and this Rambam became a big tumult, had to learn up the Shitas Rambam, and to know when does the Isser Hagosa apply and when does this Hagosa not apply. So the Maggid Mishnah says that even though the Rambam does not say any Tnoim, you look at the Rambam says simply very clear that the halacha of taking out food on the fire, when it's on the fire, it's also and across the board. He does not differentiate whether it's mavushal kotzor, whether it's not mavushal. He doesn't tell you any Tnoim. The Rambam says that the food's on the fire, you're not allowed to take off any food. And it's only kimavashal b'Shabbos because you're not actually stirring it, but it's taking out food on the fire is the issue of Hagasa, like Hagasa on Shabbos. And on that, the Ravid says, Omar Avram, Hifiz Amidoisav. The Ravid says that the Rambam is a tremendous chumrah. Where did the Rambam get this new chumrah from? It's nowhere based in the Gemara that there's the Isser of taking food off a fire, even after it's fully taking food off a fire when it's fully cooked. Which is important to note that if not of this Rambam, there would be no issue.
We put the Rambam on the screen for so you can see it, the Rambam and the Ravid. Go backwards if you don't mind. 1 second. Okay. This is the Rambam, right?
No, there's one more. You have Gimel Yud Aleph?
Yes.
That's Tess.
No, Gimel Yud Aleph? Yeah, the first one. Go backwards if you don't mind. First one.
Yud Aleph.
We do not have Yud Aleph, no. Sorry. Okay.
I'm sorry.
Let's try to put it on while the Rav is speaking. Go ahead. We'll try to get you Yud Aleph.
I'm sorry. It wasn't clear. The Rambam says again that you can't take food out of a fire on Shabbos. You can't take food with a spoon on Shabbos when the food's on the fire, because it's like Hagosa, and Hagosa is mitzorchei habishul. Which is very important to note this Rambam, because if not this Rambam, we would not have an issue on Shabbos. You come home Friday night after learning, and you want to take some cholent, and nobody else is up in the house to help you, and you're nervous. How are you going to do? Not put it out gabi karka. You have to hold it. You have to figure out a whole eitzah how to get the food out of the cholent. What's the big deal? The cholent's fully cooked. Take off the cover, stick in a little ladle, take out from the corner some cholent, and put on the cover. Nobody would notice. So why would
we have
there
on
be
the
an
screen?
issue?
This is the one, right? Asal lahachnas ma'grif l'kedera, correct? You see it?
Yes.
Okay, let's go through this again, because Leilam did not see this one. It's my fault. I must have put the wrong one on. If you can learn the asal lahachnas with Leilam again.
Says the Rambam, asal lahachnas ma'grufa l'kedera b'Shabbos. You're not allowed to stick a shovel or a spoon to take something out of a pot on Shabbos. Says the Rambam, v'hi ala eish, when it's on the fire. L'hoitzi mimenu b'Shabbos, take out food. Why? Megis, because it's like Hagosa, it's like stirring the food. V'zeh mitzorchei habishul. Hagosa is mitzorchei habishul. Like we'll see, they have the other Rambams that stirring food on Shabbos is from the need of cooking. V'nimsa mevashel b'Shabbos. So the Rambam says when you come home Friday night, you want to take some cholent off the fire, and and nobody else there to help you, and you're worried about the Isser of Chazorah. You can't take it off and put it on the ground. So says the Rambam, why can't you just stick a ladle into the cholent, take off the cover, and take out some cholent and put it back? The Rambam says you're not allowed to do it. Why not? Because it's Hagosa. By taking food out with a spoon or a ladle on Shabbos, it's Hagosa. Hagosa is mitzorchei habishul. And it's like your nimsa kimavash Shabbos. Becomes medayik kimavash actually cooking, but it's like somebody's cooking on Shabbos. You see from the Rambam, this issue of taking food out from a ladle on, taking food off a fire directly on Shabbos, because it's like a house. Now the Rambam can't be coming from Al Gemara, because Al Gemara clearly said even off fire is bishul. So I think it's pretty clear that the Rambam went to the Gemara like it's the issue of the Rambam says in English, some on the fire.
Yeah, we're having some audio problems here. Why? Maybe sound like bandwidth problems. 1 second. Let's start again for a moment again, right after you finish the Rambam, because it's not fading. Let's see what the problem is.
The Rambam learns the Gemara. The Gemara says that when it's on the fire, the Gemara says that when it's off the fire, the tzemer is off the fire, you have an issue of Hagos. The Rambam says the only time you have an issue of taking it out with a spoon on Shabbos is only when it's on the fire. So the question is, it would seem that the Rambam learned that the Gemara is talking about an issue of tzeveah, not like Rashi, that's the issue of bishul, because the Rambam says clearly that Fagosa has to be on the fire. But that is already a discussion in the Magi Mishnah and the Lechem Mishnah how to interpret the Rambam. The Magi Mishnah says that the Rambam is going when it's not mevushal kol tzarkoi, and the Rambam shita is that you're chayiv on bishul until it's fully cooked. And the Rambam learns that's the case, that's when you're chayiv for bishul until something is fully cooked. And on that, the Rambam is saying the Isser of Hagosa applies until something is fully cooked. And v'hi ala eish is lav dafka. Even if it's off the fire, it's a regular issue of bishul, of being memar bishulay. That's how the Magi Mishnah and the Beis Yosef want to interpret the Rambam. The Lechem Mishnah says clearly, if you see in the Rambam says v'hi ala eish has to be on the fire. And the Rambam does not say whether it's mevushal kol tzarkoi or not mevushal kol tzarkoi. It's pretty clear from the Rambam that there is the issue of bishul, of Hagosa, which has some form of bishul to it, even something that's mevushal kol tzarkoi, and even if it's, but that halacha only applies when it's on the fire. And our Gemara's kasha of tzeveah was a different halacha. The Gemara's question was of Mегis was only because it's tzeveah. Now, this is famous. This is the shita of the Kolboy. The Beis Yosef at the end of Shin Yiches brings down a tremendous chiddush from the Kolboy. The Kolboy says that there's a halacha that you're chayiv, even something that's mevushal kol tzarkoi, something that's fully cooked on Shabbos. You put it on, it's on for 5 hours, 7 hours. You come Shabbos morning and you want to stir the shon. It's fully cooked. You're going to eat 2 hours. It says the kobay, the zechir, a person that does hagasa, an actual stirring, not just taking out a ladle, it's chayiv from Vashal on Shabbos. And in this, we already have the Sharatzian in Siman Kuf Memches is ma'oid niskasha on this chumrah of the kobay that says that stirring food on the fire that's fully cooked on Shabbos, you're chayiv. We have the Sharatzian kasha. How do we understand this chumrah of the kobay that something's mavushal kol tzarkoi, fully cooked? It's on the fire for 5-6 hours. You come in the morning, you stir it, it could be chayiv chatzis. Ask the Sharatzian what happened to the halacha of ein bishul achar bishul. Where was the halacha of ein bishul achar bishul? Where did that halacha get lost on Haggis? So Moshe, one place in the Tshuva, he says that maybe the idea, I saw Shabbos quotes a similar idea from Shmuel Auerbach, that maybe, you have a pot, maybe there's like a little small bean somewhere that didn't get cooked, a little, there's always that, sometimes it's not, the fire is not maybe, didn't even spread out. There's some place that, by stirring it, you'll help it, that'll get close to the fire and that'll become fully cooked. It's hard to understand. How can you say chayiv that? It's only chashash. But that's like the interpretation of Moshe gives to understand the whole. But he really looked at the tremendous chumrah. Doesn't understand why would it be an issue. I think it's fully cooked to have an issue of hagos. So interpret the Rambam. I think we have to interpret the street of the kobay, and maybe we could put it into the Rambam, which the Chazon Ish does, and says that that's why the Rambam needs it has to be on the fire. So that even something that's fully cooked, that there's a chiv hagasa, this chumrah of the kobay, that there's a problem, that's all that's directly on fire. If it's on fire, you won't have this chiv. And that's the Rambam says his chumrah of taking out a spoon only on the fire. It's fully cooked. The chance here for 5 hours. The issue would be a nuchra that we have when things directly on the fire, that to stir it directly is chayiv chatos. To take it out would be the Rambam says so the Rambam was coming to answer a question. The halacha is if one person puts something on two people carry something together, we have a halacha shnayim shasu, 2 people doing something, you can't be machaya both. They're both potter. So if the idea of hagasa would be like the Rosh understands it, by mixing it, you're being makarav the bishul, and you're just making it cook a little faster, the Rambam's bothered. The Rambam interpreted that's a whole different halacha. The halacha of hagasa is not because you're helping it cook faster. The halacha of hagasa is that anyone that does something that aids the cooking, which stirring it, helps it, that it spreads it out, and it is a tzorich in it, that is considered mavashal on Shabbos. And we have the same idea clearly in the Rambam, Perek Tes Halacha Yud Aleph, when the Rambam puts together the two halachas. He says, why is seichet when you squeeze the water out of a beged? Why is that included in the halacha of kibbutz? Shlomo, can we get the Rambam Perek Tes Halacha Yud Aleph?
We're going to try. We had it before. I'll try it again. Here we go.
Rambam says, "Mechav is godin b'Shabbos."
Beautiful. Okay.
Someone who's washing his clothes on Shabbos. Someone who squeezes out a beged to get out the water, it's considered kibbutz. Squeezing water out of a cloth is kibbutz, even though you're not cleaning it right now. The Rambam says because aschita is mitzorchei kibbutz. Doing schita is for the need of the way you have to clean something is first you soak it in water, then you take out the water. The Rambam says was kemosha gosa mitzorchei abishul, just like squeezing, just like stirring is it helps you cook. So too, even though kibbutz is schita, actually squeezing out the water doesn't help you clean, but it's needed for the process of cleaning, so it's considered kibbutz. Says the Rambam, so too hagasa is needed to help. It aids in the cooking. It's not that it's makarav the bishul. The Rambam understood that it makes it actually cook faster. It's a whole different game. There's 2 things. There's cooking, and then there's that's done through fire. What hagasa does is it helps it aids the cooking process. And without hagasa, the food won't taste the same. So then you could understand the Rambam why when something, even if it's fully cooked, the kol boy says there's hagos. The idea when something's fully cooked, the reason why you're not chayiv for bishul anymore is because there's nothing left to do. But if you come here with hagos that's mitzorchei bishul, that it helps the cooking, not in the speed, but in the actual food, so you could still have a bishul afterwards, even though it's fully cooked, because it helps the food. You put everything out more and more, and then the food tastes better. So it's not in the speed of the cooking, but it's in the taste of the cooking. That's what the Rambam's saying. Hagos mitzorchei bishul. So this you can understand the sheet of the Rambam why it has to be dafka la'ish. We started off with a Rambam that says you can't take food out of the fire because you can't take food out of the fire. You can't take food out of a pot when it's on the fire because hagos is mitzorchei bishul. So the Beis Yosef wants to know, who cares if it's on the fire or not? A Kli Rishon could cook. But if the idea of hagos is that's a new type of cooking, it's not actually in the speed, but it's what it does for the food. That idea the Rambam held only helps when it's on the fire. When it's off the fire, the Rambam doesn't have such a chumrah that hagos will be chayiv. Ashal came when Al Gemara and Daf Chesan Beis says that Yechayev even for Hagosa when something's off the fire, the Rambam interpreted that Gemara nothing to do with bishul, but like Tosfos learned that Yechayev because it's sever. And with this we get to the Sharatzian's question. Once the food is fully cooked, you can't cook it anymore. But if Hagosa is mitzorchei bishul, that it helps the taste of the food, nothing to do with the actual cooking, but it's mitzorchei bishul, it's what's needed for bishul. Then you have to figure, is it needed for bishul after it's fully cooked or not? Of course it is. You could have something fully cooked. You can put 5 foods that are fully cooked together, but if you don't stir them well, you're not going to get the taste that you're trying to get. So it's very clear to understand the sheet of the kol boy. Even after something is fully cooked, we have this chumrah. That you could have a halacha of bishul, and it'll be usher when it's on the fire. And then we are choishe for this in Shulchan Aruch. Even something is fully cooked to stir it on the fire based on this kol boy, which I think is also the sheet of the Rambam.
The kol boy is only on Aish. Is the kol boy only on Aish? Rambam the is like this in the Miskalim, but according to the kol boy, it's only ala Aish. Clear?
The way I'm understanding, the kol boy would only be ala Aish, and then if the kol boy would be the Rambam, then this chumrah would only the Lechem Mishnah already interprets the Rambam that's only ala Aish. The Beis Yosef and the Maggid Mishnah say lav dafka, but if you understand the al derech hakol boy, there's a makom to hear that this chumrah would be only ala Aish.
Right, I'm saying this only goes according to those sheets and Kalim that's dafka ala Aish. If you're learning this new dino, tzorchei bishul, it's tzorchei bishul. This new gather that you were mevayer is dafka ala Aish. Okay, so one of our Mishnah says you create 2 different kinds of bishul. Cooking and mixing. Yes, that's what we're kind of saying. There's 2 different types of bishul. You see in the chat at the bottom, they're asking you shilas here. So one of them asks, there's 2 different kinds of bishul. There's cooking and mixing, which is mitzorchei bishul. Yes, that's exactly what the Rabbi Kahn is saying. Okay, let's go back.
I think that's the Rambam saying. That's how we could interpret it. That this halacha would only apply when it's ala Aish. Now the kol boy, you could say, if you have a different shot on the kol boy, then maybe it wouldn't be dafka ala Aish. But if you're putting it together with the Rambam, and you learn the Rambam Perek Gimel Lochid Aleph like the Maggid Mishnah, like the Lechem Mishnah, it's only on the fire, so it come out very clear that this extra added idea only applies when it's ala Aish. Now, with this interpretation, maybe we could help to be miyashiv a very difficult the Rosh. The Rosh in Perek Kira quotes our Gemara that the Gemara says, "Why are we not choishes for Hagos?" And the Rosh says that this Rashi is based on Rashi L'Shitasa. That's Rashi L'Shitasa. That Rashi Shita is. Let's see. We have the Rashi Le'el Gzeira Shemi Yasiach. Rashi says that there's a gzeira that a person might come to heat up his kedera, and Rashi says that gzeira is a gzeira of bishul, even though it's fully cooked. Rashi says because it's Xer Isser Deraisa of cooking. Says the Rosh, I see that idea in Rashi. It's something that there is possible bishul achar bishul by Rashi of Hagosa. By stirring it. That it's an issue of bishul. So the Rosh says midvorav lamanu ba'af betavshul shenis bashav and instanin shaykh by bishul kivan sheyesh by mashke. Something that has water, that it's what we call a davar lach, like a soup. There's the issue. There's the idea of yesh bishul achar bishul. Once it cooled down, you have the soup that you heat it up and it cooled down. So even though we know on a davar yovesh, something that a piece of meat, a chicken, once it's cooked, there's no isser bishul. It says the Rosh, Rashi's opinion is that on a davar lach, there is bishul achar bishul once it became cold. And he says that's Rashi l'shitosei, how we interpret the Gemara of v'nechesh by Agosta, that's a bishul. Now the obvious of the Rosh is the halacha that you're chayav for bishul achar bishul by davar lach is only after it's cold. If you have hot soup, you want to put it back on the fire, there's no issue. It's like a cold piece of meat. The idea why you're chayav the lach is once it cools down, there's an opportunity to wash a second time. The opportunity to wash a second time because it's cold. It's cold. But when something's hot, there's no heat or bishul. So we would see Rashi and the Gemara over its hot stuff. Where did the Rashi from Rashi? Where did the Rashi from Rashi that something that the issue of bishul?
Okay, we have some audio problems again here, HaRav Kahn. So just be aware of that. In the meantime, we're not going back upstairs, so we're going to try to do the best that we can. So let's try to move different ways place to the mic. It started fading about a minute ago. No good.
So the Rosh brings from Rashi that we see have bishul. You hold the Gemara question also that you see the issue of something the lach came cold, a soup water that came cold, a second time. So he says, where did I see that from? Rashi's interpretation of the Gemara that something is cooked could have Isser Hagosa. Where do you see that now Gemara is cold? Maybe the Gemara is hot. I understand you talk for Shabbos, but maybe it's an hour into Shabbos. Where do you see for the Gemara and something that cooled down is a chiyuv? I think the idea would be that the Rosh understood what the reason why on a davar lach is cooked. It's cold now. Why you have bishul? Why wouldn't the Dvorah be Rashi? So that other idea would be that once something is cooked, it doesn't pass the ma'aseh on it.
We're losing the audio here totally. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, we're losing the audio here totally. So I don't know what you're doing. Could you move around a little bit to maybe move back a bit? Let's see if we can, if it's the placement, or move the tablet a little bit over. We can get a better bandwidth there.
How about now?
Better, yeah.
Maybe closer to the
server there, yeah.
Now better?
Better, yeah. Okay, let's go back again a minute earlier, if you don't mind. The Havan and the Rashi.
The Rosh says that you see from Rashi that he learned the Gemara's question. They should be obligated for Hagosa on something that's cooked already, that there's bishul achar bishul balach. That if you have a soup that cools down on Shabbos, there's an issue. You have cold water that cools down, there's an issue of bishul achar bishul. From the fact that Rashi interprets the Gemara's question that you should be chayav for Hagosa for stirring the food because of bishul. Asks, I don't understand the Rosh's raya. Over there, the water cooled down. Who said in the Al Gemara the water is cool? Maybe it's still warm. So then how could it be that that's the interpretation of Rashi, that b'mavushal havi boshel, something that's cooked could have bishul again? How would the Rosh have a raya from Rashi that something cools down could have a bishul a second time? In other words, why would this Rashi be totally in the other Rashi that something cools down could have a bishul a second time? So I think that Rashi understood like the Rambam, let's say, that's called mitzorchei habishul. But the Rosh said if the idea is that once something's cooked, there's no longer a mokum for a second Ma'isa Bishul, like the other Rishonim held, then the Rosh felt that there'll be no mokum for Agasa either. Once it's fully cooked, there's nothing left to do. But from the fact that we see that you can have Agasa, even though Agasa is when it's still hot, but the idea is that just because it's cooked, it doesn't mean that there's no mokum for a second bishul. That I think would be the idea in the Rosh. Now, just wanted to get to a few cases of halacha l'maisa where this comes in, the issue of when we are choshit for agasa, when we're not choshit for agasa, and what's permitted and not. So we pass in Shulchan Aruch that a pot that's fully cooked to stir when it's on the fire is definitely not permitted. Now, even to take, we're machmer for the Rambam, even to take with a ladle when something's on the fire is asr. Now, even take with a spoon when something's on the fire, that would be an issue still of the chumrah of the Rambam. Even something's fully cooked, we're machmer on the fire. We're machmer when it's on the fire for agos.
It wouldn't be any difference in a ladle or a spoon. No difference in a ladle and a spoon.
No, I don't. I'm saying a spoon. Since a spoon could mix, Nissen Karel says that with a fork, you want to take out a piece of meat with a fork, there's no issue. Because nobody ever, it's not the derech to ever mix with a fork. You mix with a spoon. So if you want to take out like a piece of meat from the cholent with a spoon, with a fork, that'd be permitted. But a spoon you could use to mix. So I would think that a spoon is not allowed. Now the Chazon Ish has a tremendous kula, because as we discussed, this chumrah of the kolbo in the Rambam is a tremendous. It's two chumras. Number one, we're assuming on something that's fully cooked. A cholent that's on the fire for 5-6 hours. You could have bishul a second time. That's chumrah number one, which the Sharatzian says he doesn't know where it came from. Chumrah number two is that even if you assume that you could have bishul, hagasa, who said taking out with a spoon is hagasa? You're not mixing it. You're just pulling out some fruit, and by default, it's going to end up mixing. Who said that they should machmar on that? That's also midrabanan. So says the Chazon Ish. The Chazon Ish felt he didn't believe in our modern day blechs, which is a different discussion after now. But he felt that it has to be, something thick that slows down the heat of the fire. But just a little small blech is not allowed. So he felt it's better to be over on the hagasa and not do this chumrah than to do chazara and put it back on the fire. This was the sheet of the Chazon Ish. So the Chazon Ish is saying you come home for Hari night. According to the Chazon Ish, you let it take the cholent off. You let it take with a spoon off the fire some cholent. But it's a tremendous kula because the Chazon Ish had to give this kula because he didn't feel there's ever a case that's permitted to do chazara. But I did see Rav Shmuel Vosner says you could use this kula of the Chazon Ish. Sometimes you have a commercial pot that's very difficult to pick off the fire. You need 2 or 3 people to carry it to get the food off the fire. He says you could, once it's fully cooked, Shabbos morning, you have a commercial sized pot. You let it take food. You let it take with a ladle directly off the fire to serve the cholent. But Ramosha does say a case that he does permit is Ramosha says if it's not directly on the fire, we have to be careful. There's a difference between if it's a blech or a hot plate. If it's a hot plate, anywhere on the hot plate is directly on the fire. But in the olden days when people still use the blech, you have the one fire on and it heats up, fire number 2 and fire number 3. So you have food on fire number 2. On top of burner number 2, but burner number 2 is off. So says Ramosha, since it's not directly on top of the fire, you don't have to be choshid for the Isser of Hagasa. Why? Because the whole reason why we're choshid for the Isser of Hagasa, even when it's on the fire, is because a person might come to stir it when it's not fully cooked. Says the Tverer Shmuel. You come home and you think it's fully cooked. We're geyser that a person might come to stir in a case where it's not fully cooked. The cholent was put up an hour before Shabbos. Says Ramosha, the only time you'd have to be choshid for such a problem would be in a case where a person would cook in such a place. So then we're choshid that if we're going to allow him to take off the food with a spoon, he might come to, even if it's fully cooked, he might come to do agos. But if it's in a place that someone would never cook, there's no issue there, so then you're permitted to take off with a ladle.
Okay.
Now,
go ahead.
Another case, which is a discussion between Machlokes Ramosha and Shlomo Zalman, is the putting on a cover. Person takes off. Sometimes, it's a taiva. I definitely have it. Maybe other people don't. But you come into the kitchen. You want to take off the cover. You want to check what's happening on the food. The problem is we know in Shulchan Aruch it says that something that's not fully cooked, putting on a cover is makar b'shuloi. Putting on a cover back to a pot helps it that it cooks faster. Helps it that it could cook faster. It keeps in the heat. So is a person permitted to do that on Shabbos once he knows the food is fully cooked? If he knows the food is fully cooked, can he put back on the cover on Shabbos? So Ramosha in the Igris is machmer on this. He says if the reason why we made the gzeira, why you're not allowed to put back on the cover, is because there might be some food that's the Isser of Hagasa is based that there might be some food that's not fully cooked, then it should be permitted. But if the reason why we're machmer and Hagasa, even something that's fully cooked, is based on the idea of gzeira, you might come to do when it's not fully cooked. So Moshe says putting back on the pot, putting back on the cover would be an issue. Putting back on the cover would be an issue because then we have the gzeira. You might do it in the case where the food is not fully cooked. That's what Moshe says. Shlomo Zalman said no. He felt that it's not such a makom to be geyser because people know that putting on a cover helps to cook. Stirring it, people are more makel if they wouldn't see that as the isser. So Chazal were geyser to put it on. But to put on a cover, people know it's also. So if it's fully cooked, they weren't geyser. Now I just want to say one prat is if our understanding in the Rambam is right, that the issue of even when something is fully cooked, that Hagasa is mitzarchei abishul, because it helps to cook, I don't think putting on a cover on something that's fully cooked would have that issur. Because there, all it does is it maintains the heat. It doesn't spread out the food. Especially if you cooked it the whole day with a cover and you put on a cover, you took it off for a second, you put back on the cover, you don't have to worry of the chumrah of the Rambam. So be only the gzeiros is much more makom to be made. But just in that case, you have to be careful that if you took off the cover for too long and there's a little cold, the water on top of the condensations cool down, you'd have to worry about bishul balach over there. Now, one more issue is that Moshe says even on the fire, it's clear on water, on taking off water would never have an issue of Hagasa, because over there, it's all spreads even. There's nothing to worry about. There's nothing to mix. Only on something that like a thick food, a cholent, or a soup, that there's idea of mixing it, you have to worry about Hagasa. But if you have a clear soup, obviously if you have the vegetables and the chicken in it, it's an issue, because then that could become mixed. There'll be an issue of Hagasa there, but on water, there'll be no issue whatsoever of Hagasa. This is what Moshe says. And one last idea that Moshe says, the Ramah says that you should be machmer, taking it off a fire, even after something's fully cooked. There's a makom to be machmer on Hagasa. So the Mishnah Berurah says, when it's off the fire, if you want to be machmer, it should be machmer by Hagasa mamish. The chumrah of the Ramah, that even after something's fully cooked, to be worried about Hagasa, the Mishnah Berurah says an interesting lashon. Someone who wants to be machmer should only be machmer on stirring it. So it sounds like from the Mishnah Berurah that even when it's off the fire, when it's fully cooked, there's a makom to be machmer on actually stirring it, not on hitzah b'kaf, taking out the ladle. But Ramosha said an interesting diuk. The lashon of the Mishnah Berurah is haroitza lachmer to be machmer. Not that you're obligated to be machmer, and really halacha l'maisa, you come home Shabbos morning, you take the cholent off the fire, it's fully cooked, there's no issue to stir whatsoever. The Mishnah Berurah means to say, if you want to be machmer, it's not you are, but you're not obligated to be machmer. So Shabbos morning, you have the cholent, you want to take it off the fire, and you want to stir it totally. When it's off the fire, there's no issue whatsoever. That's how Moshe interprets the Mishnah Berurah.
So on Friday night, Friday night, it's still on the Aish. What can you do and what can you do? What can you not do? Both aliba the normative halacha and haraitza lahachmer. And then when you take it off the Aish, either Friday night you take the chicken pot off the Aish, or on Shabbos morning when you take the chont off the Aish. What's the lemaisa according to the Shvitas?
So when it's on the fire,
move the Mr. Burr down, please, so we can see the Mr. Burr. If you can move down the page. Let's see again where the Rav read the Halaitz Lahachmer.
Right there, the end of Kuf Yud Zayin. The end of Mr. Brewer.
Okay, move it back up again. Move it up again. Yeah, end of Kuf Yud Zayin. Here we go. Okay, let's read it together. Go ahead. Vayim Bachreinim.
Vayim Bachreinim lo nigin lahachmer b'zeh. That you don't have to be machmer when it's off the fire.
Who's the Ramah quoting? Who's the Ramah quoting? Is it one of the sheets that are you explained?
Yes.
Who? The Kolboy? No.
It'll be out there the Kolboy.
Kolboy. Okay.
But even when it's off the fire.
Right.
Not like we interpret in the Rambam, only on the fire.
Right.
And then if you'd go with that chumrah, the only way to take food, according to the Ramah, the way it sounds, the only way to get food out of a chalm pot would be to pour it out directly, not to take with a ladle. Which the Mishnah starts off. You'd have to you'd have to pour the pot onto the plate. That's how it sounds like from the Ramah. How to take food off, take chalm on a pot that's off the fire.
Are they Torah machmer this way to pour things? Dafka to pour it, not use a ladle.
No, because the Mishnah Berurah quotes "Ayim b'achronim deloy noegin lahachrim b'zeh." We're not machmer. The be'emes the ikar kamosh shekasavnu mitchila. The mevushel called tzorcha afil lahagas will be mutter. But says the Mishnah Berurah. Now here comes the interesting lashon, which some b'nei Torah are machmer. V'aroitza lahachmer, someone who wants to be machmer for the Ramah, yachmer ba'gosa mamish. Don't stir. So I was once in a shul Kiddush Shabbos morning. A little boy took the chalent off the pot and he started mixing it. The guy tells him, the Mishnah Berurah says, you shouldn't stir the chalent, even off the fire. But Ramosha says that's not what yachmer means. Not that you should be machmer. If you want to be machmer, it's not minamatmiyim. It's not like a URL or something that's an abnormal chumrah, but it doesn't mean you're obligated to be machmer. It's a very interesting lashon. Haroitza lahachmer, one who wants to be machmer. But the ikar achra, Ramosha feels, is that when it's off the fire, there's absolutely no problem on something that's mavushal kol tzarkoi to take out with a ladle. Now Friday night, the chalent Friday night, you're assuming that's mavushal kol tzarkoi, because if it's not fully cooked, you're gonna have a problem. You can't put it back on the fire if you take it off. So on Friday night, when you're taking it off the fire, you'll be able to stir the chalent also when you're holding.
You're going to be mekayim chazara properly. I mean,
but the first knife for chazara is the asking mavushal kol tzarka, because if it's not fully cooked, you're gonna have an issue of bishul. So if your chalent is fully cooked on Friday night and you're taking it off, now. We assume that, we're not sure what the difference between Meicher ben Desai and Kol Tzarka is, but a chalent's on for 4 or 5 hours, we assume it's fully cooked. So then you could stir it. You'd be able to stir it. But but when it's on the fire, to take off with a ladle would not be permitted. That would be the only chumrah that we stay with halacha l'maisa is to take chalent off the fire directly from the fire when it's mevushal kol tzarka. That's the only time that we're machmer.
Okay, so what about? Is there any heter while it's still, assuming it's still alahesh, to put a kaf into it? Is there a heter for that? And not be megis, to take a piece of meat out?
Oh, so the only heter would be to take like a piece of meat out. And this in Kerel says with a fork you can take a piece of meat out.
Okay, so because everybody hears that a fork you could, because go ahead.
Because nobody does that. It's not the derech to be megiz with a fork, so we weren't goizer on the mavushal kol tzarkoi. That'd be the only heter. Our Shabbos has another heter on let's say a kugel, that each piece is separate. By taking one piece, you're not affecting anything else. That you're allowed to take it out on even when it's ala eish mamish with a fork.
If it's cut, that's if it's cut dafka, or what's if they're not cut? The pieces are not cut into pieces.
If the pieces are not
fork and then scoop out a piece of kugel.
If it's not cupped, then you might. But I think even if it's not caught, no piece is affecting the other piece. It's not like when you have a soupy liquid, like a cholent or a soup, moving it around causes everything else to move. Here, the kugel is not moving. By taking out one piece, you're not affecting the other piece.